Oh, years ago, I read this book, The Circle Maker. So I actually enjoyed the book. It's a book about prayer, and it's about stretching you to pray bigger prayers, which I kind of like the theme of that. So I read it and enjoyed it, but there was a part of the book that actually made me angry. The pastor, as you can see at the bottom of the man who wrote it is a pastor of a huge church in Washington, D.C. So you can imagine property in Washington, D.C., hard to buy, right? And his church grew, and they needed a place to play, and so a place to have services, so they prayed. And in the book, he said, and God answered our prayer and gave us a $3 million check. And then we prayed again, and he gave us a $4 million check. $7 million in answer to prayer. And then he wrote this in the book. He said, God loves doing this. Just ask. Now, I gotta admit, the words just ask made me mad. I gotta admit, not very spiritual. I was a little bit angry, though. As I read that, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, I was a pastor of a church. We built a building. We weren't asking God for $7 million. We were only asking for $800,000. We didn't get anywhere near that. And we prayed constantly. We had prayer groups meeting all the time. We had 40 days of prayer. We prayed and fasted. We prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And we weren't asking for $7 million. And this guy prays a couple of times, and $7 million comes in. And I have to admit, my first thought was, and again, I rejected it, but have you ever wondered if God doesn't kind of have like favorites? It's like, you pray, and he just writes a couple of multi-million-dollar checks for you. Never seen that. Never seen that. What is going on? Why does it seem like some people pray and God just goes, here you go. Yep, that's what you need, no problem. What's going on here? Why does he do that and others don't? Because I'm not alone, all of us. If you follow Jesus for any amount of time, you will have experiences in your life where you trusted God and you needed him to come through for you in some way, and he didn't in the way that you were asking. And those times are so hard. The truth is, in my life, and 29 years of being a pastor, I can't tell you how many times I've watched people walk away from God because of unanswered prayer. They needed God to do something. They prayed and prayed. They trusted. Didn't work. And it's so confusing to them. I read the story years ago of a guy who wrote, in 2008, he said, my dad had cancer. I prayed so much for my dad to get better, and God never helped him, and my dad is gone. And it seems to me like God just really screwed up here. Please tell me why he didn't answer my prayers. Any of you ever wondered why he didn't answer your prayers? You ever had some huge need in your life where you just needed God and it just seemed like he was busy doing something else, helping somebody else, but not you? And this is hard. It damages faith so easily. And there are people who don't know how to relate to God anymore because they don't know if they can trust him. So that's why, weeks ago we started a series, and I called it Great Expectations, and I said the goal of the series is to teach you how to expect great things from God. And I knew, as we've been talking about faith, and trusting God and letting your faith grow, I knew that I would have to address this topic, because there's no way I can say, hey, expect great things from God, and you start trusting God, and all of a sudden you have experiences where you're praying for some need in your life, and he doesn't show up, and all of a sudden you're like, well, how does that fit with great expectations? I expected something great, and he didn't do it. So how does this fit together? So as we continue this series, we are talking about such an important subject. I want to teach you how to keep your faith alive when God says no to you. This is maybe one of the most important themes for faith. So I want to ask you to open up your program, grab your notes, and grab a pen. Welcome to those of you who have joined us this morning. To those of you who are watching on our website at PennyOakChurchLife.com, we're so glad you're there. You have these notes there. I want to encourage you to download them, pop them open. There'll be some things you're going to want to write down as we go through this today. So let's get into this. The first thing I want to say is going to be really hard for me to say, okay? Remember that every no has a reason. Now, that's easy to write down and really hard to believe sometimes. But every no actually has a reason. That was really hard. So I've been following Jesus and praying since I was 14 years old. So for 36 plus years, prayer has been a big part of my life. And I'll tell you, in 36 years of praying and filling notebooks with prayer requests, I have seen 6 specific ways in which God answers me. So here they are. The 6 ways God answers me. First one is my favorite, yes. I love it when he just says yes. I love it when I say, hey, God, I need this, and he goes, yes, here you go. Well, thank you very much. Right? Those are the easiest. Faith is fine there. Faith gets strengthened there, right? Doesn't fall apart when God says yes. The second one, though, is a little harder. It's yes, but take care of something first, because he doesn't say the last part to you. He doesn't say that. So if you flip your notes over in the back, I put down 4 main prayer killers that the Bible identifies. Did you know that the Bible actually talks about specific things that if you allow these into your life, they will hinder your prayers? Did you know that? If you let these things in your life, they will hinder your prayers. Your prayers will not be effective. So you look at that list and you think, are there any of those things present in your life? Now, I don't have time to teach on this even more today, but I just wanted to make you aware of it, because if you're not seeing an answer to prayer come through, maybe one of the questions to ask is, God, is there anything you want me to take care of first? Because he's very specific about this in the Bible, that there are things that you can do or allow into your life that will hinder the effectiveness of your prayer. So don't ignore that. Third, also sounds like no, but it isn't. It's yes, but not yet. You got to wait for the right time to come. Well, and then he doesn't tell you when that right time is. You just have to wait. And we all are so good at waiting. We wait for nothing. So it's so hard to know this one. And it just sounds like no. But eventually you see that God comes through in that one. And so the first 3, they're not the hardest ones. The next 3 are the hardest ones. And this next one is the hardest one in my life. It's when God says no, and you will never know while you're on earth what the answer was. It is the hardest faith test you will go through, in my experience. When I was a young pastor, I was in Madison at the time, pastoring a church, and my mom had a really good friend. And she had her friend call me because her young daughter, who was in high school, was terminally ill in a hospital in Madison. And she said, would you go visit her? And I went and visited her, and this young girl was wonderful. Just wonderful. And I sat in the hospital room with this young girl, and we talked together about faith and God and prayed together, and the church prayed, and she had all of her friends and family prayed, and she died. She never even made it to her 18th birthday. And I have no idea why God said no. None. And those are the hard ones, right? Is when you really need him to do something and he says no, and he never tells you why. The Bible does say this about God. God says, you know what? I want you to understand my thoughts are nothing like your thoughts, and my ways are far beyond anything you can imagine. Did you know that? Think about what this means. Think about what this means. If you were a parent, did you ever take one of your children to get a shot at the doctor? Okay, I did. They had to get all their, I didn't want them to get polio, so you get the polio vaccination and you prevent it from ever happening to your kids. What a great thing, right? But you know what's about to happen in a moment in that picture, right? That kid's about to, wah, right? Now, how easy would it be for you to explain, if you were the parent, to that child what's about to happen to them, right? Right? What are you going to say to the baby that's going to make sense to the baby? Anything? You got anything? Gaga, goo goo, nothing. The kid's not going to understand. They're just going to know they're being hurt and you're allowing it. And God says, my ways are so far beyond your ways. There are some things I simply cannot explain to you. I cannot explain them in a way that will ever make sense to you. He's not just a really smart man. He's God. And he doesn't think like we think. We can't even comprehend his ways, is what he says. I mean, this is literally the being who thought up zebras and made them from nothing. Nothing. Can you make a zebra from nothing? Here's nothing. Come up and make a zebra. What would be the first 10 things you would do? Right? You got that? Well, then how about a jellyfish? He can make jellyfish. He thought up jellyfish and he just made them. What would be the first 5 things you would do to make a jellyfish? No clue. Or how about a black hole? He makes them. They fit into his purpose in this universe. Can you make a black hole? Do you understand anything about it? He does. So do you get a little sense of what he's saying here? He says, there are some things I can't explain to you. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. And so part of what he's saying when he says that is, I need you to trust me on some things, even when it doesn't make sense while you're here. Okay? Sometimes he says no, and I can't explain it to you. Sometimes he says no, and it's not what's best for you. And you can see this actually in the pages of the Bible. You can see it in what happened with the Apostle Paul in that verse that's on your notes from 2 Corinthians. Paul had this issue in his life. We don't know what it was. Some think it was blindness. Some think it was a stuttering issue. We don't know what it was. Some physical condition. We don't know. But it says in 2 Corinthians that he prayed. He said 3 different times, I begged the Lord to take it away. And each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. In other words, no. No. That's not what you need. That's not what's best for you. Do you want to experience my power? Then you have to have this issue, because in your weakness, you'll get to experience me. So in other words, no. God said to him, what you're asking is not what's best for you. Every parent understands that. Every parent who ever raised a child had their kids ask for things that were not best for them, right? Every parent had kids say, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. Can I stay home forever? And the answer is, no, you're going to school tomorrow. Every parent had a kid say, I want to eat ice cream for dinner. I don't want to eat, and we said, no. When we say no, because what they ask for isn't always what's best for them, right? And God, because he's a loving father, says exactly the same thing. And sometimes the no's are that. And again, sometimes you figure it out later. Remember the old Garth Brooks song? Some of you like country music. There was an old Garth Brooks song called Sometimes I Thank God for Unanswered Prayer. One of my favorite old songs from Garth. And it's like he fell in love with this girl and he begged God, please God, in high school, make her mine. And then years later he saw her. It's like, oh, thank you, God, for unanswered prayers. Like, wow, thank you. That dodged a bullet there. Woo. So, right? So that's sometimes what we're asking for isn't what's best, and because he loves us, he will say no to something that's not what's best for us, because even if we never understand it, because he loves us. And sometimes he does that. And some of the no's that you've experienced in your life from God have been because what you were asking for wasn't what was best for you. And then the third reason why he says no is because sometimes it's just not what he wants. His will is most important. It's not my will, he says. He has a plan in this world. You fit into his plan. He doesn't fit into your plan. That is such an important shift that has to happen in American Christianity. We live in the most marketed world in society which says, it's all about you all the time. What do you want right now? How can you have it? It's all about you. It's all about you. And you bring that into your Christianity. It's like, hey, God, it's all about me. Guess what? You are guaranteed disappointment in your Christianity. Guaranteed. You will never experience God from that place. This isn't a trick question. As a Christian, who do we follow? We only follow Jesus, right? He's our master. We're his students. We follow him. You don't follow me. We don't follow any other religious leader. We follow Jesus. Now, what you need to understand about Jesus is he knew what it was like to have God the Father say no to him. Did you know that? Did you know that he had a prayer that was unanswered? The night he was betrayed, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knew that the next day the cross was coming. He went with his 3 closest friends. He left them by themselves. He went off to pray alone. He got down on his knees, and here's what he prayed. He said, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken from me. And then look at what he said at the end of it. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. We follow Jesus. We follow Jesus. So here's Jesus' prayer. I don't want to go to the cross tomorrow. I'd prefer not to do that. Crucifixion is a horrifying, agonizing way to die. I don't want to do that. But if this is what your plan is, then your will matters more to me than my will. And this is the key sentence. Now, let me ask you to look at that sentence on the screen and say, what percentage of your prayers do you think really incorporate that sentence? Your will, Father, not mine. What percentage of the things that you pray about do you actually say to him, I want you sincerely to hear me say this, Father. If this isn't what you want, then I submit to your will. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm asking. This is what's missing in American Christianity in so many of our prayers. We demand things from God. We act like entitled Americans and bring that into our Christianity and then tell God what he has to do for us, and then we get mad at him when he doesn't do our will. And it was never supposed to be that way. It was always supposed to be Jesus. Jesus is our example, saying, your will be done, because it's his plan, not mine, and I play a part in his plan. And you see that in stories like this one. This guy's name was Sherman Smith. And if you're an NFL fan, you recognize the old throwback uniform. He was a running back for the Seattle Seahawks. He was huge, 6'4", 225 pounds, and all muscle. And he was, at the time, the Seahawks were a terrible team, and he was the most popular player on their team because he was the only really good player on their team. And he was a strong Christian, and all of a sudden, one day, his team traded him. They traded him away. They traded him to a team called the Chargers. And he's like, disappointed. It's like he loved where he was very popular, very successful career, and all of a sudden he's traded to a team he has no say in it. And then, to make matters worse, 2 weeks after arriving at his new team, he blows out his knee. Now that's a bad thing if you're a running back and you don't have a knee. And here he is as a Christian, he's doing rehabilitation on his knee, and he's questioning God. He's like, what? Doesn't the story sound like God kind of let things get away from himself a little bit? It's like, oh man, God, kind of lost track of him, didn't you? You let him go to a team he doesn't want to go to, and 2 weeks after he gets there, now he gets injured. It almost seems like God doesn't know what he's doing, right? That's what we would be tempted to think. If you were in that situation, you were him, you would be sitting there saying, God, what's going on? And he was asking the question, but in the middle of that time of rehabilitation, he got to know one of his new teammates. This guy, his name was Miles McPherson. Miles was a party animal, living up the NFL superstar life. Women and alcohol and everything else that was fun in that world. But Sherman Smith got to know him. And because he was rehabbing, he had lots of time to spend. And he started spending time with Miles and started talking about his faith and how important his faith was to him. And one day it all clicked, who Jesus was and what Jesus meant. And Miles McPherson became a follower of Jesus, and he was transformed by this living God. He couldn't wait to tell everybody about Jesus. He started speaking at youth events. He became one of the most popular youth speakers in America at these Christian events and led thousands of teenagers to Jesus. But then, in 2000, when he got out of football, he decided to start his own little church in San Diego where he was playing football. That's Miles McPherson today, standing on the stage of his church in San Diego. In 2000, when he launched this thing, 3,300 people showed up for his first service. It was the largest church planting launch in the history of America that we can find records for. Today, over 12,000 people attend one of the fastest growing churches in America in San Diego. They have to have 5 services every Sunday just to try and accommodate the crowds. And so many people's lives are being changed because God's plan was that Sherman Smith would go to a team he didn't want to go to and get hurt. And then he would meet Miles. And he would tell Miles about the amazing love of Jesus. And what you have to internalize is the truth that's so hard for American Christians to internalize. It's not about me. It's not about me. This has to be a sentence that we get comfortable saying over and over again in our Christianity. It's not about me. You see, that's the only way you sincerely say what Jesus said. It's about you, God. Your will be done. It's not about me. And as long as you think it's about me, you are going to be disappointed constantly because you're going to then tell God what to do every time something comes up. And then it's about you, and it really isn't. Jesus is our example. Jesus is our example. Saying to what Jesus said, I want your will to be done, not mine. It's not about me. So what do you do in those times, though? I mean, we can see now how God used that injury. What do you do in the times where he says no, you're disappointed, you don't know how to move forward in that disappointment? Well, I've learned a lot about that, and so the only other thing I want to talk to you about today is this one. And the wording on this is really precise. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to word this because the words are so significant. And what I want you to hear me say is it really is an intentional act to turn back to God in those times when you are disappointed and hurt and confused by the decisions he's making. Turning back to him is what I want to say, and here's why I say it. When I was prepping this message, I came across a list that I made probably 8 years ago. And it contains I don't even know how many items. These are things that I can go back through my old prayer journals and I look at all the things I prayed for, and these are a list of some of the most painful times God said no to me. I can't honestly even read the list. I found it, started reading it, can't. It just generates so much emotion, even to this day, it hurts. And this was 8 years ago. I can add a lot more to this list in the last 8 years where he said no. And this is painful stuff. And when you get hurt, your natural inclination is to turn away from the person who hurt you, right? If your spouse is a jerk and kind of snipping at you, do you want to move toward them? Just be loving? No, you want to move, you turn away, right? You close off to them. If you're going to the office tomorrow morning and your coworker or manager's kind of a jerk to you, you're not going to say, oh, well, let's just be, no, you're going to turn away. You're going to put a little wall up and keep yourself safe. And we do this with God all the time. I've done this. I did this. In one of these things on this list, one of the most painful things I ever went through, I begged God to do something over and over and over again. He kept saying, nope, 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 nope. And I was so hurt that I turned away. I stopped reading my Bible, stopped praying, and the only reason I kept going to church is because I was a pastor and I had to go to church. That's the only reason I went. I know what it's like to turn away from God in your pain when he says no to you. I'll tell you truthfully, in that 8.5 months I was away from him, nothing got better in my life. Nothing. I became more bitter. The world became more dark. I became more depressed. There's no life down that path. And finally, after 8.5 months of that, I learned how to turn back to him. It starts with this. You have to be honest with God and others about your feelings. And I didn't give you a lot of space to write that, so I'm sorry. You got to be honest with God and others about your feelings. Honesty is such an important factor of Christianity. You have to be honest with God. Like you're tricking him anyway. It's like, oh, I didn't know you were angry at me. Yeah, thanks for putting one over on God. Oh, no. He knows exactly how you're feeling. And look at how he can handle it. Look at this verse in the Bible. Habakkuk, oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Ever felt like saying that to God? Some of you, that is the sentence right now that sums up how you feel about God right now. He just doesn't listen. He's just not listening to what I'm asking. Because you're hurt and you're disappointed because you're asking for something super important and you're getting nothing. And it just feels like he's not listening. Look what he says. How long will I cry out to you? Violence. I mean, violence is being done to him. Talk about a time where you really need God to show up. And you're not saving me. I mean, look at the honesty of the pages of the Bible. Your Christianity will begin to grow the day that you start really being authentic and vulnerable with God. That's when your spiritual life will start to take off. Is if you're going to pray little safe prayers, oh God bless so-and-so, God bless so-and-so, when you're really saying, God, I'm seething inside. I'm mad at you. I really wanted you to come through on that thing, and you didn't, and I don't have any clue why you didn't, and I'm mad. And truthfully, I don't even want to talk to you right now. Some of you, that's the honest thing you need to say to God. He can handle it. You're not tricking him anyway. He already knows that's how you feel. You have to learn how to be honest with God. That's where the healing begins. The second thing I'd say to you is you have to turn back to him. Then you have to put his promises back in your mind. They will not be in your mind. So you have to put his promises back in your mind. When you're hurt and confused and disappointed, you will not be thinking about what God has promised in those times. So this is one of the key things I do that prevent me from going down that unhealthy path of turning away from God again. It's one of the key things. I constantly focus on what he's promised me. In my prayer journals, where I write down things I'm praying about, I have these words written out. Every delay has a reason. Every no from God has a reason. And then I say this, God knows what he's doing. And I say this, my God will bring good out of anything I go through. Do you know that that is a promise in the Bible? So either he meant it or he's a liar. I know he's not a liar. There's no part of me, 0% that believes that God is a liar. 100% I know that last sentence is true. And so every no that I get in my journal, I know. Every no has a reason. God knows what he's doing. He makes jellyfish. I don't like jellyfish. He makes black holes and zebras. I don't make any of those things. Couldn't tell you the first step to take nothing and turn it into a zebra. Couldn't tell you. But he can. He is that smart. He knows more than me. He knows what he's doing even when I can't see it. And I put his promises back in my mind that he's with me. He'll figure this out. He's got a plan. Years ago, I read the story about a man named David Smallbone. This is his real name, Smallbone. He's from Australia, married, had 6 kids. Strong Christian. One day he started to get into the Christian music industry and he became a Christian music promoter. So he would go around setting up these concerts. And as his business took off, he started getting more and more aggressive. And so one day he took a huge risk. He set up this enormous concert. He prayed like crazy. Everybody's praying. Yeah. All these big name stars, all of this money put out, and hardly anybody came. He took a bath on it. He lost $250,000. 250. He had mortgaged his house. He put everything in on this risk, and it failed. And then he lost his house, which is a problem when you have 6 kids. They foreclosed on him. He lost everything. He had no idea what he was going to do now. He had no idea how he was going to make ends meet, so he started looking anywhere for a job, and he found a job advertised from Nashville. There was an artist in Nashville who wanted to hire a Christian promoter, and so he applied for the job. And the artist said, "Yep, I'll hire you." So he literally sold the last few possessions he had, bought 8 airline tickets, moved his family from Australia to Nashville to take over as a promoter for this artist. 2 weeks after he got there, the artist said, "I'm withdrawing the job." So now here's this father of 6 living in a foreign country with no job, no money, not a dollar to his name, still in the red. He said, "I couldn't get out of bed for days." Have you ever been that broken? You ever been so broken you couldn't even get up? I mean, you're talking about disappointment with God. Can you think of a higher thing than that? 6 kids, you can't feed them. You have no idea how to clothe them, no idea how to shelter them, no idea you have nothing. You're living in a foreign country. You've got no prospects. So a few days later, when he finally was able to get out of bed, he and his wife sat down with their 6 kids. The oldest was 14 at the time. And they told him what was going on, and they said, "We need God." I mean, talk about... There are times God brings you right to the edge of the cliff so that you just know, if God doesn't show up, we're just done. And so they began to pray as a family. And it is fun to pray with kids because kids have such tremendous faith. They just believe. And so the kids were praying, and the whole family was praying, and God started doing little things. All of a sudden, some families in the community heard about what happened. They brought them groceries. So it's like, okay, we're not going to starve. And then some other Christian family heard about their situation and gave them an old minivan. So at least they can get around now. So it's like little things started happening as they turned back to God in the middle of catastrophic no. Let the concert work. Nope. Let my house not be taken from me. Nope. Let this new job in this other country work out. Nope. Talk about keeping your faith alive in the middle of awful circumstances. Well, now they're living in Nashville. He's hunting for jobs. And his daughter starts singing at churches and little area groups. And all of a sudden, she starts getting more and more singing opportunities. And then all of a sudden, if you're going to sing and you've got a good voice, Nashville's probably a pretty good place to be, don't you think? Probably pretty good place to be. And she got noticed by a record label. And at the age of 15, she got signed to a record deal. At the age of 15, Rebecca Smallbone. But who wants to go to hear a concert by Rebecca Smallbone? So they went with an old family last name. And they called it Rebecca St. James. In the 90s, she was one of the most popular Christian singers out there. She won a Grammy. She had 2 albums that went gold, certified gold. And her dad couldn't keep up with the business of promoting his own daughter. And that's where I thought the story ended, but I looked it up this last week to see if there was more, because I'd heard that story years ago. Yeah, there's more. Turns out his boys sing pretty good too. You ever heard of a band called For King and Country? They're one of the most popular Christian bands out there today. Yeah, those are his boys. All of those no's, over and over again, taking you down to nothing. Literally nothing left. And what are the promises? Every no has a reason. God knows what he's doing. And he can bring good out of anything. Do you get it now? Do you see this? You think your God can bring good out of a job loss? Out of bankruptcy? Out of every catastrophe you go through, this is the promise, and this is why you must keep your faith alive and turn back to the God who alone can do this. I can't do that. I can't do it. I can't give anyone a recording contract. Nobody. God can. God can do anything. So then the third step in this is you take a step of faith. Before you even see God do anything, you take a step of faith. And I put a sample one on the back of your program. Flip your notes over on the back and look at the top. It's a prayer that you can pray, and you just modify it to fit your words where your heart is today. But here's what it says for those you're watching online. It says, God, I don't know why you said no to my request. I mean, this is going to be so hard to say and say this, but I still believe in you. I know you love me, even though this hurts. I know you have a reason for this, even though I can't see it. So before I even see anything, I want you to know that I will keep following you and I will keep trusting you. Does it take any faith to say that? Do you know what happens when you put a little bit of faith and aim it at God? Do you know what happens? What Jesus has promised you? He will crush mountains in your path. All he's looking for is the smallest amount of faith. And if you will take a step of faith like that and turn back to him, he will run to you. He will be with you and he will move the mountains. You don't have to move them. And then there's one more piece to this, turning back to him. The ultimate change that has to happen for us is in this last one, letter D. We have to make our lives all about doing the will of God. That's what it has to be about. It has to be about the will of God. It has to be us getting to the point where we are saying to God in our prayers what Jesus said to God in our prayers. Kind of important. Whatever Jesus did, we should do. He's the master, we're the student. He's the teacher, we're the pupil. And so we learn to say this. Father, here's what I want, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. I want your will to be done, not mine. And we mean it when we say it. We don't just say it as a formula. We get to the point where we sincerely mean what we're saying to the Father, saying, hey, this is what I really want. I'm not denying I really want it. But your will be done, not mine. And that's where Christianity really begins to change. This is why so much of American Christianity is so powerless and weak and you don't see any answers or prayers, because we're constantly telling God what our will is. We're constantly saying to God over and over again, here's what I want, and here's what you need to do, and here's what I'm demanding from you. And there's no picture of that in the New Testament, none. There is only what Jesus modeled, where he said, I'm here to do the will of the Father who sent me. One time, his disciples came to him and they said, are you hungry? He's like, no, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And they're like, did someone slip him some food? And he said, no, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. It was like nourishment for his soul. It is all about the will of God. And until you understand that, your Christianity really won't connect you with God. It has to be that you make this transition that is only about the will of God. And we're saying what Jesus said every time we pray. I want your will done today, not mine. So if you listen to me over the last couple of weeks, you know that this has kind of been my focus for 2021. It will be my focus for the rest of the year. I like to read Christian biographies, and usually every year I read all or some of a biography of a man named Frank Laubach. And I tell his story regularly because it inspires me. Frank had a miserable first half of his life. He was a Christian, he was a missionary, nothing was going right. And halfway through his life, at 45, he made a change to the way he prayed, and it changed his whole life. And he began to pray. His goal every half hour was to turn to God in prayer, wherever he was, and say, Father, I'm your servant. Is there anything you want me to say or do for you right now? Anything. Now notice, that is entirely about listening for God and doing his will, right? That's what it's all about. He made the will of God his focus, and he's tried to do it every half hour. He'd pray that prayer. Then he tried to do it every 15 minutes, and eventually he tried to do it every minute of his life. Completely changed his whole life. He had his biography is incredible. Incredible adventures with God, because now you're lining your will up with his. Now I can beat my head against a granite wall all I want, but I'm not changing that. If that's not what God wants, I don't care what I do, I'm never changing that. It's much better for me to submit to the will of God, because then everything I ask for that's a part of his will, the answer is always yes. Always. It's always yes. So 3 weeks ago, I started this experiment where every 30 minutes, I was just going to try that. I would try and pray that prayer, whatever I was doing, every 30 minutes. And so I kept notes, and I've brought these notes every week. So these are my notes from this last week. This is my end of my third week of doing this. Every single day, I sit at my office is at home, and I sit at my computer, and I have a scratch pad in front of me, and every day I put a new one down, and every time I say that prayer, I write the time down. And I don't write them all down, so this isn't all of the times that I say it during the day, and I only do it when I'm sitting at my desk, but it carries over in the evenings, it carries over in the weekend. It has become a habit now in my life. I can have a conversation with you and in my mind be praying and saying, Father, is there anything you want me to say to this person right now in your name? Anything you want? Anything you want me to do for this person? You show me. I can be in meetings, and my meetings are all Zoom meetings, so they're all video conference, and I can be praying and saying, Father, anything you want me to say to this person right now? Anything? I'm yours. What do you want? What would you like? And when you begin to line your will up under the will of God, all of a sudden everything begins to change. Everything. The changes in my life in the first 3 weeks of doing this experiment every single day, and I'm not stopping, every day. It's why I keep bringing these to show you I'm doing this. 3 weeks now. It's now a habit. I'm not letting it go. I will not stop this. I'm experiencing things that I want to experience. God becomes more real. Prayer becomes something passionate. Worship becomes something, for most of my life, worship music was, take it or leave it. Didn't really matter. Didn't connect with me much at all here. Oh my goodness, does it connect now? It's like he pulled this little wall down around my heart. I don't know how else to describe it. God feels close. God feels real. I have had so many times when I'm asking that, God, do you want me to say something? And something pops in my mind to say to the person. I can't even tell you how many times in the last, I bet it's easily 10 times a week easily, where I felt prompted to text someone or email someone or call someone or write somebody or do something for someone. And I'm just responding with, yep, you got it. That's what you want. I'll do that. And now you feel like you're part of the plan of God unfolding in this world. And you partner with God. And I see him clearing out obstacles, and I see him opening brand new pathways for me that I don't have to open. I can't give people recording contracts. God can. I can't open paths in my future. You know who does open paths in my future? God Almighty. And my job isn't to open the paths. My job is to bring my will under his will and let him do his work. This is essential. I'm not done talking about this in this series. We are going to talk about this again and again, so Christians understand it's about this. Here's the will of God, and now I bring mine under his. A great example of this is a story of a woman named Catherine Marshall. So it's Christian. She and her husband lived in Washington, D.C. They had a young baby. She got tuberculosis. And she got this at a time when it was very serious. She couldn't recover from it. She wasn't in bed for a weekend. She wasn't in bed for a week. She wasn't in bed for weeks. She was in bed for months with a brand new baby. She couldn't get up. She couldn't even take care of her own child. And she begged God from her bed, what are you doing? I got to take care of this child. I got a family to take care of. I can't even get up. I can't go to church. I can't do anything. So she begged and begged and begged and begged and begged God to heal her, God to heal her, God to heal her. She demanded healing. She claimed healing, all the things we do. It's like, it's about me, me, me. And then one day her husband, and they were both strong Christians, and her husband brought her a book, and it was a story of this missionary overseas who had gone overseas and gotten tuberculosis. And when she was reading the story, she saw the parallels between what was going on in her life and what was going on in that life. And all of a sudden, it's like someone holds a mirror up to you, and you got a big piece of spinach in your tooth, and you didn't notice. It's like, all of a sudden she saw, and she said this. She said, I looked, and as I read this woman's story, I felt like my faith sounded so shallow. And I sounded like all my prayers were so self-centered, because it was all about me. It's all about me, God. Don't you get this? Heal me. Because it's about me and what I want to do. And so here's the prayer she prayed. She said, Lord, I've done everything I know how to do, but it hasn't been good enough. I'm tired of struggling with your will, and I'm tired. Listen to this sentence. This is like something every American Christian needs to burn in their mind. I am tired of trying to get from you what I want. You have to get tired. You have to experience God, get tired of trying to get from God what you want. And once you get tired and you make the transition to what she said next, she said this: if you want me to be an invalid the rest of my life and stay right in this bed until death comes, here I am, I'm ready. That's surrendering to the will of God. Now, the cool thing about her story is, after she said that, God healed her. But he doesn't always. Sometimes he doesn't. But she'd have been okay with that. Because she was no longer making it all about her all the time. It was now, God, what you want and whatever you want is fine with me. And that's where we have to get to. Is that where you live? I don't live there. The reason why this experiment is so important to me that I won't let go of it is because I want to be there. I want to be there. Where I'm not telling God what he has to do in my life, where I'm not praying self-centered prayers that are all about me, that they are really what Jesus prayed. Hey, God, this is what I want, but you know what? Your will be done in this, not mine. Your will. If that's not your will, then here's what I know. You know what you're doing. And if you say no to this, you'll bring good from it somehow, and I'm going to trust you regardless of what you say to me. I hope as I've been going through this day, I've not made this sound easy. In case you can't tell from the emotion it generates in me, this is not easy. When he says no to something you really, really want, it's not easy. It is painful. And I don't have all the answers. God has said no to me on some super painful things that I'm not talking about, and I can't give you an answer. I cannot give you an answer, but I will not turn away from the only God who restores my soul. Nothing out there is going to restore my soul. Nothing. It will distract me for a while, and I'll be miserable when the distraction is over. Love and joy and power and healing are in him, and I will not turn from him. I will learn what I'm teaching you. And some of you really needed this because maybe you felt like spiritually you were drifting away from God a little bit. Maybe some of you are watching, especially you've turned away from God because you got to know, and it hurt like crazy. And you're like, I don't know if I can trust you. And I don't really want to pray to you anymore. And God brought you here, or has you watching this, so that you can hear me tell you, I've been down that path. There's nothing good down that path. You will not know life down that path. And you can turn back to him. He can handle the emotion. And it doesn't take a lot of faith. That prayer on the back of your notes, you have to only believe it that much. Did you know that? Do you know that Jesus said if you have a mustard seed, just a speck of faith, that's all it takes? Some of you praying those words, you have a speck of faith. Good news. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. He doesn't say you have to have great faith, just a little bit. He loves you. He cannot put into words how much you matter to him. He cannot describe it. But he's demonstrated it. He gave his only son, and what Jesus was praying to avoid was God's plan to rescue humanity. The death of the perfect Son of God on a cross to pay for my sin so that my sin could be erased from my life. Erased. That's what he offers all of humanity. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Maybe for you spiritually, the next step is to let Jesus Christ forgive you, be a part of your life. You know, what he was praying to avoid that he did not avoid was the cross. And the Bible says that as he hung on the cross, he took into his body all the unloving things you and I have ever said or done. Did you know that? That's what he was there for. He was on a mission to rescue us because we have brought unloving things into this world. And they have to be paid for. And Jesus paid for all of it. And then he rose again, and if you will let him, he will forgive you, erase the sin from your life. He will make his home inside of you. He will bring you into his plan for your life. And if you want that with your head bowed, you can say something like this to him. Say, Jesus, I'm putting my trust in you today. I don't understand all this yet, but I've heard what you were trying to avoid and what you willingly went to, the cross. And you did it because I've done unloving things and said unloving things, and it's cost you deeply. And I don't understand all that yet, but with the faith I have, I'm turning to you. Please, forgive me. I want you to be a part of my life today and from this day forward. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up today, if you're watching online, you can go to our tab at penuelchurchlife.com where it says contact us, and there's a little place where you can type in a message. Thanks so much. We've been getting some messages recently. Really appreciate people writing and letting us know that they're watching. And if you want to tell us about a decision you've made, write it in there, and we would love to hear about it. And if you're watching, or if you're here, you can just fill out the little connection card in your program. Maybe you asked him to forgive you, or you want to renew your commitment, or you want us to pray about something that's really heavy in your heart today. We will pray for the will of God to be done in your life. Okay? So thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next week.